Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special Grid Life wrap up. We know there's still plenty of on track action coming up, but we have several races to report on. Joe Samaniego here, along with Kobe Lambeth from Grid Tonight and Ben Schneider from Grid Encore and LastCar.info. A big thank you to our Patreon investors calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, Matthew, for investing in the Grid Network. Be sure to invest in us through Patreon. Link in the video description. You'll get some Grid Network stickers mailed out to you and a thank you letter. And of course, you could do a one-time investment through YouTube Super Chat. Buy me a coffee. $10 or more will also get you stickers. And of course, we have a new membership page on YouTube, so be sure to check that out. And the simplest way to support us is, of course, subscribe to us right here. Hit the bell icon. Don't miss any of our programs, including the special Indianapolis 500 pre-race show Sunday morning, as well as our regular Grid Live pre-race on Saturday. Gentlemen, let's keep talking about the Indianapolis 500. Practice just wrapped up. You're getting ready for the Fast 12 and, of course, the last row shootout. And yesterday, qualifying day, that was a roller coaster of emotion with the full spectrum from the heartbreak to jubilation, a testament of the unpredictable nature of the sport, and especially the Indianapolis 500, where only the fastest 33 get in. Let's start with the driver that had the biggest relief at the end of the day, Rinus Veekay. Veekay went out early Saturday morning, was one of the first three drivers to set a lap, but he crashed, back end got loose, went spinning into the wall. That team had to work really hard to put the car back together. He came back on the track later in the day, 29th fastest, not good enough for him and the team. They went into the priority lane, and with 2 minutes and 40 seconds to go, he started his 4-lap qualifying run, and he put down a monster first lap, a great second, third, and fourth lap to go from 29th to 11th, making the Fast 12 for today. Veekay, he didn't practice today, but they think they got something for the Fast 12, maybe the Fast 6. I got to ask you, Kobe, he was celebrating yesterday like he had gotten the pole. His mom was there. Huge relief, big feel-good story. How big of a relief and a confidence boost is this for Veekay, the team? And do you think they could take the pole?
Well, Joe, I think this was certainly one of the top stories to come out of qualifying yesterday. One of your feel-good stories, because when he had that big crash, honestly, I was thinking Rinus Veekay might be in the last row shootout today, and the car was so heavily damaged. I didn't even know if they were going to be able to get that car back on track yet, have enough speed to put it in the Fast 12. I never expected to see him put it in the Fast 12. I know they did a few qualifying runs after it was damaged. I assume, when they fixed the crash damage, that the car was still be fast enough to get him in the show, but I didn't expect it to be that fast. But definitely, I think this is a huge sigh of relief, and that's why you saw the emotion on Rinus Veekay's face when he exited the car, and definitely a confidence boost for their team that they were just looking to try to get into the show yesterday after that crash. But now I think they have a shot to go for the pole. It just shows, Ed Carpenter race. Whenever they come to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, they always bring fast Chevys at the 2.5 mile speedway. And I really think that we could see Rinus Veekay put up a big qualifying number today.
Yeah, an incredible turnaround from Rinus Veekay, and great run for him to get into the Fast 12. And, absolutely, this is what Indy means. This is, why we go through these qualifying runs. You have a driver that, has been in an accident, and you would expect potentially, like you mentioned, Kobe, to be in the last row shootout as they try to get him back ready to go and, just try to put yourself into the field. And he did much more than that. He went and made it into the Fast 12 of the last-ditch qualifying effort, and more power to him. So we'll see what he can do later today. But yeah, we'll get to the last row shootout in just a second here. There's still plenty of storylines, no shortage of storylines with those four drivers. So it's going to be interesting to watch this afternoon.
Going to be interesting to watch. And for Veekay, he comes in 19th in the standings in the NTT IndyCar Series, not having a good year. This could be that moment to turn things around if he could get into the top row 1 through 3. I think that would be huge for him, that team. Hopefully turn their season around, and what better race to do that than the Indianapolis 500. We're talking about the joy of competition with Rinus Veekay. Let's go to the heartbreak, especially Graham Rahal. Graham Rahal did not set a time. And once again, second year in a row, he is in the last row shootout. Frustration is starting to set in. Last night, Jennifer reported that Graham was suspicious of Honda engine allocation. However, on the Joshua Birch watch along. Matthew Owens placed more fault on the driver. Here's what Matthew Owens said yesterday.
I don't mean to come across as mean-spirited or dark-hearted or whatever, but I'm tired of hearing Graham Rahal say that he can't do anything else more, and that the guys have worked their tails off. Clearly they haven't. Clearly none of that is true. 2 years in a row that he's in this spot with a team like that and a name like that on the two names on the side of that team, Rahal and Letterman. It's inexcusable to be on this day, tomorrow, 2 years in a row. So stop trying to tell us how hard everyone's worked and that you can't do anything else more. Because Rinus Veekay, in a much more underfunded team, just went from 29th to 11th. Stop telling me you can't do anymore. Yes, you can.
I agree.
Get it together.
I agree too.
2 years running is a joke. Absolute joke.
Either do the thing, make the freaking top 30 of a 34-car field, or get someone in the car that can.
Matthew Owens not holding back at all. Of course, he's from the Ultimate Sports Radio Network. I have to ask you, Ben, does he have a point about the missing link being the driver in this case, Graham Rahal?
If he's talking strictly about last year, then no. Last year, I don't think you can put fully on Graham Rahal. The entire team, I mean, Catherine Lake was the last one to get out of last row shootout, and then the other three Rahal cars made up for 3 of the 4 spots that were in the last row shootout. So last year, I don't put on Graham nearly as much as I do this year. Takuma Sato's in the Fast 12. Now, I know he's a 2-time winner of this race, but that shows that the team is ahead of where they were last year. There were unexplained team-wide issues and flaws. Comment in the chat says it all there. A team could simply follow Sato. Now, again, like I said, you don't win this race twice in 4 years by accident. Takuma Sato is one of the best we've seen in recent years at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Could easily be a 3-time winner of a race. He let 2012 get away from him. So I think that this year in particular, it does come off as, Matthew used the term mean-spirited here. It's tough because I feel a little bit for Graham Rahal. I understand that it's got to be an incredibly frustrating situation, but you definitely don't have the same excuse that you had last year, where it's clear that the team, just with all of their cars, is struggling for pace and for speed when you have your teammates ahead of you solidly in the field, one of them even in the Fast 12. And to be back in this position once again, I think this year more than last year, what Matthew's saying certainly holds true. And I think Graham Rahal, if he does in fact fail to qualify for the second year in a row, he's going to have some tough questions he's going to have to answer from the press, because this is just absolutely ridiculous. And for a team like this to be in this position 2 years in a row, it is inexcusable. And I think the driver's got to take a lot of that heat here this year when you have teammates that are solidly in the field.
Yeah, Ben, totally agree with you. I don't have much more to add there, but it's been interesting watching how Graham Rahal has been reacting, and this is why we love Indy 500 qualifying. We hope it remains the same for many, many years to come, and the excitement leading into last row shootout, with today being bump day. You saw the emotion and the frustration on Graham Rahal's face yesterday, and especially today in the practice session for that last row shootout. It seems like nothing is going wrong. I agree that you can't use the same excuse. So last year, I believe it's a mix of both driver and team, because as we saw in that practice session that just ended a short while ago, the team didn't tighten Graham Rahal's right rear. Could you imagine if that wheel had come loose during his qualifying run and end up shunting? That would have been really bad and game over for him if that just happened. And right there, we have Bruce 196 and in the chat room saying the same thing I just said. Just went out there and practiced with loose luck. No, dude, it's the team and the driver. Yeah, just what I was saying. I believe it's a group effort there, but I do believe that the driver does have to take some accountability here. And if Graham Rahal gets bumped a second year in a row, I agree with you, Ben. He's gonna have to answer a lot of tough questions. And for this team that's been having issues at this track, you think a year after this happened that they would really go to work over the offseason and figure something out. But when you look at this team, specifically the number 15 team, it really seems like they haven't really learned anything at all.
Well, just to follow up on that comment again, of course, it's not Graham's fault, but his team didn't tighten his wheel. But why is Graham in this position to begin with? If Graham had set a fast enough 4-lap average yesterday, they wouldn't have had to go out for practice for the last road shootout to get ready to make their last chance qualifying run and avoid getting bumped. And I mean, they wouldn't be in this position in the first place. So if Graham could have just done that, that to me is what's more on the driver. Like nobody's sitting here saying, oh, it's Graham's responsibility to physically go to all 4 of his parts of the car and check to make sure it's like, of course that's on the team. Nobody's saying it isn't. But if the driver had put in a faster 4-lap average yesterday, we wouldn't be in this position here in the first place.
Yeah, and I also want to bring up another point from reporter Christopher DeHard. He said that Graham Rahal said that the team's setup lasers might have been giving them incorrect readings all this time. So, like, what does that say? It seems like it might be a deeper problem than what we think at RLL, if that's the case. Because if you've made it this far into the month of May and the team setup laser have been giving you incorrect readings all this time, like, what have you been doing? And it's like, what's different with Takuma Sato's program? As we see how far ahead he is, the other cars. Yeah, Sato's the outlier way up there. Then you have Lundgaard and Fittipaldi, who were just able to get into the top 30 and lock themselves on the field. And you have Graham Rahal in the same position he was in last year. It just doesn't make sense at all. I didn't understand the comment that Graham made yesterday about Takuma Sato's engine, said that Takuma has a good engine, and we saw Honda fire back at him, saying, that the engines go to where they are. We're not like giving Takuma Sato a specific engine or something like that. I just thought Graham might have been taking a shot at Sato there, considering his very strong ties with Honda.
Frustration mounted over there at Rahal. It is just unbelievable to me to see this for the second year in a row, Graham Rahal going through all this, and I'm convinced he is not exactly one of the drivers that could likely go out and make it out there. Hi everyone, VK on pole, Siegel or Rahal will be bumped is the prediction. So we got a lot of folks commenting in the channel. Be sure to share your comments and opinions with us on the air. Now, of course, I had to follow up with both of you guys on this.
Joe, I don't know if you want to check your mic settings real quick. You're very quiet on my end.
Okay,
yeah,
can you hear me?
Same here.
We got you now.
Yeah, much better. Yeah, I thought it was just on my end that he was quiet, but
very quiet.
Yeah,
live internet TV. So I got to say though, Graham Rahal, if this happens again, he fails to qualify. What does this do to his racing career and essentially his confidence?
Well, Joe, looking at the future of Graham Rahal's racing career, if he gets bumped again today, I think, he'll have to do some serious soul searching. And I think he will. I think he was starting the process of doing some soul searching last year. I remember he was talking to the media like how he didn't know if he would return to RLL in 2024 or if he wanted to, try to get a ride with some of the more competitive teams to see what he could do there. But I'm not really sure what Graham Rahal will do now. So I know some people have suggested if he does get bumped again, maybe he becomes an Indy-only driver, just like we've seen what happened with Marco Andretti and Ryan Hunter-Reay. But look what's happened the last 2 years at Indy. If he wants to become an Indy-only driver, that might not be the best thing for him. But all in all, I think that he'll really have to do some soul searching whether or not he wants to continue racing full-time in the IndyCar series, if he wants to drop to a part-time role and try to do Indy-only or try to get his cars in order and go for a bigger team. I know he also mentioned like the bigger teams, like like the Penske's doing well and all of that. And I'm sure he wondered how he would do in one of those other top cars at the Speedway.
Yeah, well, there's always a cynical voice that says, "Well, look at the name on the car and the name on the team. Of course, Graham's going to have this ride as long as he wants it." But I think there are going to have to be some serious questions that are answered if he fails to get in the field here for the second year in a row. Now, Kobe, you brought up the idea of, doing what Marco Andretti does now. And again, Marco, to Graham's credit, Graham has won more races than Marco did in his career. But aside from 2011, when, again, I think, I don't know if you can put this entirely on Marco. It was a team-wide issue with, Ryan Hunter-Reay failing to get in. Mike Conway, I think, was also one that failed to get in. There were questions as to whether Danica Patrick was going to be able to qualify. So Marco had to put in a last-ditch effort to get in 2011. But that was, again, a year where the entire team was looking for pace. This year isn't the case over at Rahal because of how far up the field Takuma Sato is. He's going to be going for the pole later today. So, if Graham Rahal fails to get in, you can make that argument that, maybe he takes a step back and, takes on more of an ownership kind of role within the team or a driver advisor role or whatever that may be, and then becomes an Indy only driver. But the situation here would be very different because this is going to be the second year in a row now that he's in this position here and could potentially fail to qualify once again. And, hopefully we don't see any, driver injuries. I mean, again, it would be, very ironic if he were to still race for the second year in a row. But of course, we hope and pray that everybody stays safe during the next weekend of practice and it doesn't come to that. But I don't know if Graham would be, if teams would look at, bringing in a wild card entry. There are some former drivers. J.R. Hildebrand is at the track there this weekend. I don't know if that would be maybe the driver that you'd rather have on standby than the guy that hasn't even been able to qualify for the last 2 years now. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Of course, everybody's future is still, pretty much up in the air this time of year. There's still a long season ahead of us, and we'll see. I would assume that Graham would at least finish out the year in the car this season. But yeah, I mean, this is the biggest race of the year. This is where, the vast majority of your resources go for the entire season. If he can't get in later today, I think he's going to have to answer some serious questions.
And you remember last year, Ben, when Graham Rahal got back into the race with Dreyer and Rumble, his Indy 500 was over before it began. You remember they had the mechanical issue, had to go to the garage, and he came out, he came out laps down. So so he ended up running into issues there. So the Speedway has not been kind to him these last couple of years, and we'll see if they can try to crank out some speed in that car to try to get him into the show.
It's gonna be really interesting what happens. Possibility is low, but can Ericsson be the Indy 500 champion in the shortest time to be bumped? I'm searching. I believe Al Unser from 94 to then 95 bumped.
Yeah, because Penske had the beast in 94 and then had one of their most epic qualifying bump day failures in 95. So that would be, I think, the record would be Unser winning, and then the very next year not even making it to the race. Although, Marcus Ericsson was one lap away from being a back-to-back winner, and then he's in this position here. But I think that's as short a turnaround as you can have. Unser in 94 to 95. I don't know if that's ever happened going further back in the race's history, but that was the example that I was looking at as well, Joe.
That's what I was thinking as well too. And of course, with Ericsson, he's joining Graham Rahal in this last row shootout. He crashed earlier this week, Thursday. That has really set the team behind. But today, they're looking better. He's still not 100% safe, but feeling probably much better than Graham Rahal right now. And of course, he nearly won 2 consecutives, as you said, just 1 lap away. Ben, is Ericsson the favorite out of the 4 to make it in?
Well, he should be. I mean, he's got probably the highest rated team with Andretti, and he's obviously won the race 2 years ago, came very close to winning it again last year, and I think the team should be in a position where they can find some speed in that backup car to be able to get him solidly in the field. Obviously, they haven't yet, which is why he's in the last row shootout. But if there's any team that I would trust here, obviously, Andretti has vast more resources over Dale Coyne and probably even Rahal Letterman to a certain extent. I would say you have to look at Ericsson as the favorite, but then again, this is Indianapolis. There are no guarantees. There are no sure things here. So we'll have to wait and see. I guess we'll know in just a couple of hours' time.
Yeah, for sure. I think Ericsson is definitely the favorite to make the Indy 500. A team like Andretti Global shouldn't even be in the last row shootout to begin with. But this is just some of the crazy things that ends up happening at Indy. And I know Marcus Ericsson was very frustrated with himself for making that mistake, because these teams, they spend months and months building these cars for this specific race because the chassis for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, they have like these special little kinks and stuff in them to try to extract as much speed as they possibly can from these cars. And when you crash the car, have to try to go to a backup. Obviously, that car is not going to be built up to the same standard. So obviously Ericsson lost a lot of speed, but I believe Andretti is going to continue working on this car. They're going to get him enough speed to get him into the race. I think if he doesn't, at least qualify 31st, that would be a disappointment. But getting into the show, I think Marcus Ericsson is going to get in unless he crashes again. I think a wreck is the only thing that's going to prevent Marcus Ericsson from getting into this race.
A wreck at this time, I think, will be game over for any of those 4, really. Couple of comments in the chat room. Why Sato only did 8 laps today while he had not tested race setting? That is something we've been seeing. I think a little bit of the weather conditions. Very hot, slick track today. Maybe just doesn't want to focus so much on that because we still have Monday. You know you're going to be in Monday's practice. Focus on just a few laps. That's going to count for the pole. By Indy 500 prediction, Penske front row, Larson top 10. Rahal makes it in. We'll see what happens with Graham Rahal. It's going to be really interesting. Let's talk about the last two drivers in the last row shootout situation. Catherine Legg, Nolan Siegel, both of them with Dale Coyne Racing. All four drivers in the last row shootout powered by Honda. But Dale Coyne Racing, as it was mentioned, one of the smaller teams, less funded teams. Siegel's crash on Friday really set him behind, and many have predicted him to go out. I think especially before yesterday. Last year's Stingray Robb, driver in the number 51, was in the last row shootout. He made it out. David Malukas, he was 23rd in the lineup. So Dale Coyne Race is not exactly the fastest team out here in Indianapolis. Kobe, is Dale Coyne Racing the team that you believe be most likely to have one of their drivers miss out?
I mean, when you look at the situation from a logical point of view, I think Dale Coyne Racing is most likely to miss out on the Indy 500 with one of their drivers, and the driver who is most likely to miss out, in my opinion, is probably Nolan Siegel. And after he had that scary crash where he flipped over, it seemed like, that team with the backup car, it was a road course car. That's actually the car, that Jack Harvey is using on the road and street course. And we know that cars like that are not going to have the same amount of speed. You might be able to fine tune it, so you can have at least some decent speed in the race, but, qualifying is a different story. So it was not a good thing at all for Nolan Siegel to ride off that car. But, hey, these things happen at Indy. You'll see rookie mistakes happen. And that really what it seems like it was, especially, since this is Nolan Siegel's first time on a big oval like this on a super speedway, because, in the Indy Next Series, they only have a limited amount of oval racing, and they don't race on any of the bigger ovals in that series. So I think, inexperience really cost Siegel there. But one of the positives I think is going on for him right now, he didn't really have the speed in the qualifying practice session earlier today. But it seems like that they've gotten that car faster, and if Dale Coyne Racing just keeps working on that car, I believe they can potentially find them enough speed to get him in the show. But if I had to make a guess, I think he would probably be most likely to miss out right now. I think we're going to see Catherine Legg make the race, and overall it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. I know with Siegel in that road course car, he as we've been saying, he's likely to be the one to miss out, but never say never at Indy, because you see a lot of magical things happen in this place. How many people expected Kyle Kaiser in that Junco's car to, bump Fernando Alonso? And Kaiser, he was very slow, in all of those sessions, and nobody expected him to get Alonso. And look at what he did. So I think if there's some Indy magic, Nolan Siegel and that team might be able to make it work.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Kobe, I think he did the same thing in a road course backup car after he crashed.
Yes.
In a car that didn't have nearly as many sponsorship decals as Lee Diffie put it, global motorsport giant that McLaren is. Nobody expected them to bump out Fernando Alonso, and that's exactly what that team did. So, if you would asked me last night, I would have said it's probably going to be Nolan Siegel or Catherine Legg. I think that the Dale Coyne cars have struggled for speed this week entirely, but what we saw in practice so far, Catherine Legg seems to have found a little bit of speed from yesterday, and like I said, you would think that Ericsson and Andretti would be able to find the answer and get him solidly in the field. So then it comes down to Siegel and Rahal. And again, based on what happened last year, based on what happened 5 years ago, I think all the ingredients are there for more bump day magic. And maybe Siegel does a combination of the Kaiser and Harvey and pulls out a last ditch effort to bump Rahal out for the second year in a row. But again, I think we'll have to wait and see here. On paper, I think Dale Coyne would be the team that's in the most trouble, but with how that 15 team looks right now, and then there's the mental aspect as well. That team has to be so frustrated and so exhausted. And, I know they're all professionals, and sometimes you find yourself in that situation in the sport, and, they're the best in the world at putting that out of sight and out of mind when it comes time to actually do your job. But there is that added hurdle that they're going to have to get over as well. I don't know. It would not surprise me in the slightest if it's Rahal on the 15 team. But on paper, Siegel does have a very tall mountain to climb, so we'll see if he can do it.
Going to be really interesting to see. That's going to be coming up, as well as the Fast 12. There's only 3 Hondas in the Fast 12. We mentioned Takuma Sato. We also have Felix Rosenquist and Kyle Kirkwood. Colton Herta got bumped out when Rinus Veekay did a miraculous run late in qualifying. Graham Rahal, of course, with his last run getting out of the priority lane, that denied Alex Palou a chance to go into the Fast 12. He is going to be starting 14th. Kobe, do you think Honda has any concerns considering they have only those three in the Fast 12, or is the main picture the 500? Because at 500 miles, plenty of time to make up ground.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm Honda, if I'm freaking out right now, but it's certainly unfortunate to see, you know, where they are right now in qualifying, because because Honda had a lot of high expectations for qualifying day. It's really weird to see Scott Dixon starting where he's starting right now, because, you know, you're usually seeing Scott Dixon, you know, move on to the Fast 12 and potentially have a shot to go to the pole. And I don't really know what the deal is with Honda this year. You know, when they turned up the wick for Fast Friday to get this additional boost, I think, you know, you come back to the practice session that's going to happen early this week, and then, you know, carb day on Friday. I think if Honda, you know, is down on the speed charts, then, you know, when we go back to, you know, race trim, then I would start to worry. But I don't think they have anything necessarily to worry about right now. That for the most part they can just really focus on the race and, you know, get what they get in qualifying later today in the Fast 12. But I do want to point out an interview that NBC did yesterday, you know, with Scott Dixon's race strategist Mike Hull. It kind of gave me a very odd vibe, you know, when he says that we're planning to qualify for the Indy 500 with Honda. I thought that was just a very odd statement to make that I still don't entirely understand right now, because it's not like you can be like, hey, we're gonna go qualify with Chevrolet right now. I remember I brought this up in our private group chat. It just gave me an odd vibe. I don't really understand why Mike Hull made that odd statement.
Yeah, Kobe, that left me scratching my head too. Like, I mean, what did you think we thought you were going to do, right? Did we really, was that even an option to, like, you know, we're going to qualify with Honda? Well, we were just going to make drastic changes last minute and rip up our contract with Honda and go try to qualify with Chevy. Like, of course you're going to, just the way he worded that was just very, very strange. I'm still trying to make sense of that myself, but like, of course, 500 miles, you know, is plenty of time to make up difference. We've seen drivers come from, you know, the middle of the pack or even further on back to win this race before. You know, could be a situation like 2019 again, where Alexander Rossi was fighting for the win with Simon Pagenaud, and he made the comment after the race that the Chevy seemed to have the edge on horsepower. Honda had the edge on fuel economy. So if it, you know, it's a race like 2021 where we only get a couple of cautions, maybe that could play to Honda's advantage, because if they're a little bit down on power, they're not burning as much fuel. They can go a couple more laps in between runs. But I think that, you know, we're just gonna have to wait and see. You know, obviously there's still a lot that has to fall into place before we come time to run the 500 miles a week from today. So I think there's still plenty of time for Honda to make some ground up. You know, it's certainly not a situation where you're going into this month knowing that Chevrolet's going to win this race. There's absolutely no guarantees here, and Honda still has a lot to look forward to, I think, and a lot of strong teams and a lot of strong drivers that can get them there.
Now let's switch over to the Chevrolets. Everyone's talking about the race, especially up front of Fast 12. You got the Chevrolets with four of them. The three Penske drivers, they got the front row right now entering today, but Alexander Rossi's right there in fourth, despite going out 34th. So when they all did the drew, the Penske drivers all had spots within the first 10 qualifying spots. Rossi was the last person that initial round to go out. Kyle Larson, 6th place, and his teammate Pato O'Ward, 10th. So the 3 out of the 4 Arrow McLaren Chevrolets made the Fast 12. Ben, starting with you, overall, does Arrow McLaren have a shot at overtaking Penske or putting at least a car, maybe 2 in the front row, prevent a Penske sweep?
Front row, yes. I don't think they're going to have enough for pole. I think the pole is going to come from one of these 3 Penske cars here, but I think McLaren has enough speed where they could break up that Penske sweep and prevent them from doing what they did a few decades ago and sweeping the entire front row with all 3 of their cars. I think McLaren definitely have a shot to get 1, perhaps even 2 of their cars in the front row, but I think those 3 bullets that Penske has, 3 very capable drivers, 2 of whom have won this race before. One is the defending winner. I think that the pole sitter is going to come from the Penske group, but again, there are no guarantees here. McLaren could, you know, Rossi's obviously shown a lot of speed. What a story it would be if Kyle Larson put it on pole, that would create massive headlines going into the next week. But I think the McLaren certainly has a shot for sure to at least get on the front row and make things interesting.
Yeah, I think McLaren has a slim chance to get on, but I'm with Adam. If I was a better man, I'm not. I would say Penske front row sweep. I think those 3 Penske cars are going to lead the field of green for the 108th Indianapolis 500. But if I had to pick one of the McLaren drivers who could potentially break up the Penske part of the front, I think it'd be Alexander Rossi. This is someone we haven't really talked about a lot during this month of May, and watching Rossi drive around the speedway. This time around, he's really starting to look like, that Alexander Rossi of old, the aggressive Rossi we saw in that number 27 Honda at Andretti. And I think that this could potentially, be a good race for Alexander Rossi to try to rediscover that old magic that we've seen from him, because, it's been up and down for him these last couple of years. And I think Rossi has a lot of speed in that number 7 Chevrolet right now. And I think he could potentially make some noise today in qualifying.
Qualifying today is going to be really interesting for the Chevrolets, because one of the biggest stories is Chevrolet, the pneumatic event happening with their engines. This is when the drivers are shifting through 5th and 6th gear. Then the engine just loses power. It happened to several drivers yesterday, starting with Pato O'Ward, then Kyle Larson, Ed Carpenter, Christian Rasmussen, Connor Daly, Augustine Canapino, who looked like he was going to get in the Fast 12 late on, but then that event occurred, took him out. Will Power today. We saw this affect qualifying runs. The concern is that it could happen today, especially in the Fast 12 or worse, the final 6 going for the pole. Ben, do you see these events as something for Chevrolet teams to be worried about heading into the race, or is this just pushing the limit and maximizing the engine in qualifying?
It's not something that I don't know that I would be losing sleep over, when it comes time for the race. But I might have lost a little bit of sleep last night going into qualifying. When you think about how on the edge these cars are and these engines are, if you're going for the pole today in one of these cars, I think that, you certainly have to be very worried that this could happen again, given how many drivers it's affected so far. Now in the race, obviously you're not going to be running out qualifying trim. You've got 500 miles. It's more of a not slow and steady wins the race kind of deal, but you're not running pushing 234 miles an hour on a 4-lap average for the entire 500 miles here. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it during the race unless we start to see some issues pop up during practice week next week. But I think for drivers going for the pole today, if you've got a Chevy engine, I think that it is something that has to be in the back of your mind for sure.
Yeah, and also Chevrolet is lucky that there aren't any drivers in their last row shootout this year, because that would have been very worrisome if you're a Chevy driver going for last row shootout. But luckily, all of the drivers who's going to be going for the final spots are all in Hondas. But yeah, Ben, I totally agree with you. I don't think that this is anything for any of the Chevrolet teams to lose sleep over right now regarding the race, because this has only been an isolated incident in qualifying trim when they got the additional boost on Fast Friday. And it's unfortunate that this happened. Joe, you mentioned Augustine Canapino. I feel really bad for him, because it looked like he really did have the speed to get into the Fast 12, and then it cut off, and then he was like cussing on the radio. He was like very upset and angry, even declined interview with NBC after that, because he was just so angry and frustrated, because that was the lap of his short IndyCar career so far. It's unfortunate that happened. And yeah, I'm sure a lot of Chevy drivers are going to be worried heading into qualifying today, and we'll just have to see what happens. And I remember this same incident happened to Pato O'Ward. I believe it was either last season or the season before at St. Pete. Ended up costing him a win. He was out front ahead of Marcus Ericsson, and then this event happened. Where the engine just lost power, and then Ericsson drove around him. Then the power came back up, and ended up costing him the race there. So unless we see this event happening in the 2 practice sessions coming up later this week, I probably wouldn't be too concerned about it. But Will Power, he's obviously, you mentioned, Joe, it happened to him today in the qualifying practice. He was very frustrated. He said that he felt like the team, should have done some more running yesterday, to potentially diagnose this issue. But, it was a call from the team, that decided, that we're just going to call it one and done.
Yeah, in the chat room, Canapino was supposed to be in the top 10 with Junco's emotional, but it is what it is. Vamos Titan, of course. Titan for Canapino, and I believe Grosjean's in the Phoenix car. the two of them having different themes for the Indy 500. Of course, top of the hour, qualifying will be on the air for the Fast 12 and the last row shootout. Earlier today, we had Formula One. Imola, Ben, looked like we might have something at the end, but then it was the same old story as Formula One has been lately.
I just saw a tweet from Tomo asking if the race was worth a rewatch, and the consensus, I think, is only the last 10 laps. Lando did make it a little bit interesting, but let's talk about the race. Let's talk about Max Verstappen once again. An uneventful race up front until the very end there. Verstappen dominated the race, but by the last lap, Lando Norris had closed the gap to less than a second. Ultimately, however, it was too little, too late, but I would have liked to see that race go on for at least a few more laps. Maybe Lando could have gotten the job done, but he settles for second place. Charles Leclerc for Ferrari ends up with the final spot on the podium in third. So, Kobe, given this pace from Norris, given how he did make it interesting here at the end, are you now convinced McLaren can start contending for race wins on a weekly basis against Verstappen and Red Bull?
To be honest, I think it's a little too early to say if McLaren can contend with Red Bull on a weekly basis, but I certainly think they're a lot closer than they have been in a long time. And if Max Verstappen ends up having a slip up or something go wrong, I think Lando Norris, McLaren, or even Oscar Piastri, when he's having a good day, that they can take advantage of that situation. But it was very encouraging at the end of the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix when we're able to see Lando closing. But like we're saying, if we just had a few more laps, maybe Lando could have pulled it off. But going back to Miami with the upgraded car that McLaren brought, with a lot of people called it a brand new car, I think that this is something, I think they really hit the nail on the head with this one. And they just need to continue working with this car, continue to improve and see what they can do with it. And hopefully McLaren can make these Formula One races a lot more interesting, because it's usually a cakewalk for Max Verstappen. But for the sake of the on-track product, it was just really great to see, Norris make it interesting at the end, because usually, talking about Max Verstappen winning by 10, 15, 20, or 20 seconds.
Yeah, McLaren overall, solid weekend. They are definitely there. I think the big thing, qualifying, they made a mistake with Oscar Piastri going out there and impeding Kevin Magnussen in Q1. That went him from second down the grid order because of that penalty. He just could not get around Charles Leclerc, and he at times looked faster than Lando Norris. What could he have done if he was up there with Max Verstappen? McLaren has to step up their game even more, because that's what Red Bull has done. Red Bull, they just almost seem flawless, at least with Max Verstappen. When it comes to the racing luck in Miami, that helped McLaren out. This weekend, I think it would have been very much a different story if you had Oscar Piastri putting pressure on Max Verstappen to use up those tires a little bit more, and then you could have one driver, maybe Piastri, pit first, have the second driver, Lando Norris, do the overcut. Put Red Bull in that pressure situation. They missed out on it this time, but definitely I think the next race weekend, Monaco, qualifying is so important there. McLaren has to feel pretty good that they could potentially be up there in the front row with Max Verstappen and hopefully get a better start and control the race from the get-go.
Well, let's talk about Verstappen's teammate, Sergio Perez. Disappointing day for him. He missed out on Q3 yesterday, of course. Now, Leclerc is now 6 points ahead of Perez. Norris 6 points behind. So, Joe, I'll go to you first for this one. Does the possibility of Perez losing P2 in the driver's standings hurt his chances of keeping a seat, or could Norris even potentially get ahead of Perez for P3? What do you think of this battle for second we have right now?
This battle for second is tightening it up, and at Monaco, I think Lando Norris might have the advantage. I know Perez has won in Monaco before, and he's been referred to as the king of the streets. But Lando Norris, the McLaren team, they just seem to have that positive momentum. All you have to do is just be better than Sergio Perez in qualifying. I think they could get that done with this car, the setup they got going on. Overall, run your own race. Sergio Perez, let the pressure get to him. Charles Leclerc, he's gotten a pole here before at Monaco. He could easily be up towards the front. And the big thing is this, at 6 points, we're talking about there's a potentially couple of positions here or there. I think the pressure is going to be building on Sergio Perez. As for his seat, I believe might still be safe. I mean, unless they consider Yuki Tsunoda, who's doing pretty good. I know we'll talk about later on. I just don't see Daniel Ricciardo being in there. And then there's the rumors of Carlos Sainz, but It'll be really interesting to see what happens. The big thing is try to control second place because you got 1-2 yesterday with Red Bull. They don't want 1 and 4th or 3rd.
Oh yeah, well, to be fair, I think the pressure, has been building on Sergio Perez for a very long time now. But if they were to replace him at some point because he's underperforming, I don't really see any good options of who you could potentially replace him with, and that's why I think unless something crazy happens, I think we'll probably see Sergio Perez finish this season out, especially with Daniel Ricciardo not performing as well as we thought that he would be performing this year, and Yuki Tsunoda, you mentioned, Joe. We've seen Red Bull go on the record and say that that they really don't know about Yuki because of his attitude and temper, which really gets the best of him. A lot of time, it doesn't really seem like Red Bull is interested in giving Yuki a promotion anytime soon, and it probably wouldn't be fair to to put Liam Lawson in that type of car way too soon, and put a whole bunch of pressure on that young driver who a lot of people are extremely high on and had some great races last year in his select starts. And then you mentioned Carlos Sainz as well. Like his future, would he potentially be open to a reunion to Red Bull? I think if Carlos Sainz were to go to Red Bull or something like that, this is probably not going to happen until 2025. But I think regardless of what happens with Sergio Perez this year, I look for him to keep his ride. And in regards to Lando Norris getting ahead of Perez, I think it certainly could be possible if Lando keeps up this form.
Yeah, I would say his seat's probably safe for a year. It's just going to be a matter of the 25 driver lineup falling into place. Montoya says Imola looks like a kart track with the current Formula One car. Yeah, I think the commentators were saying one of them said streets of Imola and then caught himself because it's technically a road course, but the track is still pretty narrow, probably narrow enough to be a street circuit in many respects. Let's talk about one of those RB drivers now, Yuki Tsunoda. Joe, you talked about him on Grid Live pre-race yesterday, and his season so far, he's 10th in the point standings, 13 points behind, or I'm sorry, it looks like 20 points behind Lewis Hamilton. Is that 18 behind Fernando Alonso? So within a race, technically, I don't know if RB is going to be competing for wins anytime soon, but it is a pretty close gap there, all things considered, where you would expect Mercedes to be, and 4 points ahead of Lance Stroll. That Aston Martin team certainly struggling this weekend. Kobe, can Yuki outperform Mercedes at Monaco next week and gain more ground on those ahead of him in the points?
Well, I know Mercedes is, obviously not what they used to be, but I still think that they can do well enough where both Lewis Hamilton and George Russell can outperform Yuki Tsunoda on the streets of Monaco. But as we know, when you come to Monaco, you see a lot of interesting things with the run order because it is such a obviously narrow and very unique track, and you may see some teams who might be able to run in places where you don't usually see them run all of the time. So I think there could be a possibility, we could see Yuki run well at Monaco potentially, depending on the situation. But if I had to make a bet on it, I think Mercedes will probably do much better, than the two Visa Cash App RB entries.
I think Monaco is going to be the weakness for the VCARB team. Mercedes, they don't exactly have the best car. We know that, but I think they're going to still have a solid enough weekend to be ahead of them. Then once you're ahead of them in qualifying, pretty much the only way you're going to get around is through the pit stops. Mercedes would have to have a serious issue to allow the VCARBs to get around it, particularly Yuki Tsunoda. Daniel Ricciardo has won at Monaco. He has shown some flashes of brilliance this year. I'm just not confident it's going to be this weekend. I just don't this upcoming weekend at Monaco. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens that weekend. At the end of the day, Yuki Tsunoda, if he was to outperform Mercedes at Monaco, it would be talking more about Mercedes dropping the ball an error current rather than out qualifying them and just staying ahead through the pit stops and everything.
All right, we'll leave it there. Lots to look forward to coming up in Monaco. In the meantime, we move on now to a Supercars recap. Cam Waters, we've known that name from NASCAR here recently, and we'll see him back at Sonoma. He was back on the podium's top step, bringing Ford a second win and a Ford sweep of the weekend with Chaz Mostert's win on Saturday. Mostert was second, with Will Brown making it double podium finishes this weekend. So, Kobe, is this a promising sign that Ford can contend with Triple Eight? And is it a sign that the rest of the competition has caught up to Triple Eight as well?
But first, I want to say that in race 2 of the weekend, it was actually Chaz Mostert who crossed the finish line first, but he got a 5-second time penalty for an infringement on pit road because he pulled right out in front of, Waters' tick for racing teammate Thomas Randall, and that upset the race officials. So they decided to give Monster a penalty. So Monster came very close to sweeping the weekend, but all in all, still another blue oval in victory lane in Perth in Western Australia. But I certainly think Ford has to be very excited how this weekend went for them in Perth, because it shows, that Triple Eight started off the season, running strong with both Brock Feeney and Will Brown, but Will Brown still had a great weekend. Brock Feeney was kind of off all weekend, but Ford, we all know the story of how it's been going for them in this new Gen 3 era, and how they were struggling compared to the Chevrolet, but it definitely shows that Ford has closed the gap. And I believe that these teams, Walkinshaw Andretti, United, and Tick for Racing, and even the Dick Johnson Racing, Shelby Power Force are even starting to catch up. I really believe that Ford can contend with Triple Eight, and we might be able to see a lot more competition, so Will Brown doesn't run away with his championship, although it looks that way right now when you look at the standings.
Well, like you just alluded to, Kobe, Will Brown leads the points by 136 over Brock Feeney, so he's guaranteed to have the points lead after the first race of a 2-race weekend coming up. Darwin is the next race on the weekend with 150 points on offer for the winner, but 30 points still being offered for last place, so mathematically only 120 to gain. Does that allow Brown to be more aggressive as he can push and lead with the points lead regardless?
Yeah. I think looking at the point situation right now, you can see Will Brown take more risks on the track. His team can be aggressive with the strategy, because right now he has such a comfortable lead. He doesn't really have a lot to lose. But I think if he continues to, even on days when he doesn't go out and dominate, continue to be consistent, get those good finishes, just keep points racing, I think he'll be perfectly fine. But when you get a large enough championship lead, you can certainly be a lot more aggressive with your on-track racing and your race strategy.
All right, we will leave it there and come back to recap supercars when they come back to the track. But in the meantime, we'll bring Joe back in here and let's talk about our one shining moments.
Yeah, time for a good one shining moment on this racing weekend. If you're watching us right now, drop down in the comments below. What's one thing that stood out to you the most this racing weekend? What's your favorite moment? And Joe, I'm going to start off with you.
My one shining moment, I would say, has to come out of essentially what we saw at qualifying yesterday. Rinus Veekay. This is the kind of drama stories that we see only in the Indianapolis 500 qualifying, where you go out there early on, you make that mistake, you hit the wall. That team worked so hard to put the car back together again. Rinus Veekay went out 29th fastest. The team could have settled, just said, let's just focus on getting the car ready for Sunday. No, they push it. Let's keep working on it. We could be faster. And what a moment. Second to last run, they went out there, phenomenal effort to get into the Fast 12, and now they're going to be running again. That team has struggled this year. They are not the same as years past. I felt like Rinus Veekay, he has one win. He has potential to win more. If he could go out there, be in the front row, this would be a huge boost for them and their season. Rinus Veekay, Ed Carpenter Racing, making it all happen yesterday. That's my shining moment.
I'm going to give mine to Kyle Larson, and I think we might even have a chat comment that's saying the same thing here. But, we're talking about Graham Rahal and the amount of stress that team is under right now. We were talking on the Grid Tonight shows all week that it looked like it could be that same kind of situation for McLaren that Fernando Alonso found himself in 5 years ago. Larson was visibly frustrated. He was struggling to get up to speed. He had the engine cutting out issue like a lot of the Chevy drivers have had. But he, to his credit, found the pace, and he's going to be going for the pole later today in the Fast 12. He's solidly in the field and, one step closer to trying to become the second driver ever to finish all 1,100 miles in the double. Kyle Larson's been admirable so far. I'll give him my one shining moment.
Yeah, and I'll join you guys on that. I also have to give my one shining moment to Kyle Larson as well. It's been so amazing to see how he's adapted to this Indy car so easily compared to how different it is to the stock car that he's usually driving. But Kyle Larson, if it has a steering wheel and 4 tires on it, he's willing to drive it, whether it's midget cars, sprint cars, cup cars, and now Indy cars. Kyle Larson is a do-it-all driver, and this has been super impressive to see what he's been able to do with this car, and to be able to make the Fast 12. I think that this is really good for him, obviously, and I'm interested to see what he's going to be able to do in the race. I know tonight he's supposed to be flying down to North Wilkesboro Speedway to run in the All-Star race, and depending on what happens in Indy qualifying, could be a tight squeeze, but I'm sure McLaren and Hendrick are doing a great job coordinating his schedule and making sure that when it's time to leave the speedway, that they'll try to get him there in time to start the All-Star race. It would certainly be quite a storyline if Kyle Larson ends up, having a great qualifying day here at Indy and then goes on, wins the All-Star race later tonight. Who knows what could happen?
Anything can happen in the world of motorsports, and of course, we encourage everyone to subscribe to us because tomorrow Ben will be back on the air, Grid Encore, to recap the NASCAR All-Star race and all the other races that they covered on Grid Encore. Cole will be on the air Wednesday for Grid Tonight, your weekly motorsports news program. Then Ben and I will be back on the air with the Women of Motorsports. Saturday, Grid Life Pre-Race, we're going to preview Formula One at Monaco, NASCAR at Charlotte Motor Speedway. We got MotoGP running as well, too. Formula E running, a busy Memorial Day weekend, and of course, Sunday, a special Grid Life Pre-Race for the Indianapolis 500. Link in the video description. Hit that notification button when we go live so you don't miss our special annual Indy 500 pre-race show. Buy me a coffee, YouTube Super Chat. We'll thank you on the air. You'll see the thanks button. If you were to hit that button, we'll thank you the next time we go on the air. And of course, you get your name on the leaderboard. And right here, our Patreon investors calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, Matthew. They invest in us each and every month. You too can invest in us. Get your name read at the beginning of every program and some Grid Network stickers mailed out to you all right here on YouTube. And of course, a big thank you to everyone for tuning in, participating in the chat room. Be sure to share with your family and friends that love motorsports, because we do this because we love motorsports as well. For Ben and Kobe, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time. Enjoy qualifying and the races.